I am discovering me. Discovering me. My identity was hidden, taken from me, long before my ancestors began hanging from trees. The serpent, he was the real thief, deceiving my sister Eve. He made me forget I was royalty. My father is a king. I am the daughter of the everlasting, loving, omniscient three. He came to give me life. This world wants to take it away. He never intended for it to be this way. Free will, a blessing and a curse. Say my name. My life matters. God said it first. Discovering me. Redefining my identity. Made fearfully and wonderfully, flaws and all, my destiny was altered when I heard his call. I can't see where I'm going, but I know what I'm leaving behind. My faith is blind, lamps at my feet as I shoulder his load. I feel light, I see life as I walk the Samaritan road. All right, so I'm very excited today. I have my friend Vernon Davis, who is a newly published author and an overcomer of type 2 diabetes, which he reversed naturally. Vernon is going to share his story about how he was able to do that and just a little bit about his journey with God through that, and also talk a little bit about his book. So go ahead, Vernon, introduce yourself.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much, Nora. Thank you so much for having me. Again, my name is Vernon. Last year, 2020, in the month of July, I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and it was tough. It was very scary to hear such a diagnosis be casually expressed.
Yeah.
I mean, the doctor, it just rolled up the doctor's tongue like he said that consistently.
Wow.
And it was terrifying. In my emotions, I was freaking out, thinking about, the duration of my life, or at least what was left of it, and the quality of my life. I was terrified. I mean, I was in tears. But leading up to the diagnosis was even more of a struggle and much more scary after learning that for me, type 2 diabetes was self-inflicted. I grew up the better half of my life being addicted to food, using food as a comfort for any and all negative situations that I went through, any negative emotions that I had. I felt like I could subside those emotions with food, candy, soda, juice, at any time of the day. It wasn't until 2020 where I started feeling different symptoms, different changes in my body that I had no idea where they came from. Urinating frequently. I was in the bathroom every hour on the hour. Working from home, it wasn't an issue because the restroom was pretty convenient. But when my wife and I traveled to Michigan to go to a wedding for one of my best friends, that's when I realized that going to the restroom very frequently was an issue. So much so, largely in part due to feeling like I couldn't hold it. I mean, there were many times on that road trip that I pulled over on the side of the highway, speed limit 70, 75 miles per hour, pulling over on the side of the highway to relieve myself because I couldn't make it a half a mile up to the next exit to stop at a hotel or at a convenience store or a restaurant. And so, that was very eye-opening for me, thinking, I might have a problem. But tried to block it out of my mind, like, what? Made an excuse, right? I've been drinking a lot of soda, I've been drinking a lot of juice, I've been drinking some water. Coincidentally, at that same time, I could never quench my thirst. I mean, my mouth was always dry, very thirsty. But even then, no real thought of there may be a serious issue with me. My fingers and my toes were tingling constantly. Sometimes they were going numb, and the same with my left leg. And lastly, my left eye, blurred vision, at random times, and it made no sense. I've always needed corrective lenses to be able to see, but blurred vision was new to me. But even then, I just kind of brushed it off as, there's not much of anything wrong with me. My wife, who was very adamant about going to see a doctor consistently through our friendship, our engagement, as well as the beginning of our marriage. She, was really supportive in that way, even, when I didn't want to hear that I should go to a doctor. And in my book, I detail, how often I made excuses, and those excuses that I made to not go. And it wasn't until after coming back from Michigan, where I went to the doctor to get checked out for this issue that I had, and to find out that it was type 2 diabetes. I was just terrified, and I was kind of conditioned to think about having people involved in my life, people that I could lean on, that I can go to share with, pretty intimate details about my life, and to seek help. And I learned that, as a Christian, as a young Christian, 10 years ago, I think, to have accountability partners in my life, to help me through, various life situations, good or bad. And so, I was able to kind of lean on, that, I guess it's a learned skill. And, you have to, practice, being vulnerable, and practice seeking out accountability partners. So I had two of them in addition to my wife. I had two of them in particular that I was able to call as soon as I left the doctor's office. One being a herbalist, a great friend of mine by the name of Breon Reed, as well as my good friend and trainer, Mr. Tony Lee. And I spoke to them both about, what I was just told, and sought out their support, but also their assistance, with the things that they do for their respective businesses, and put a great plan together to incorporate natural herbs and sea vegetables to naturally heal my body, in contrast to using prescribed medication. There was a particular medication that I was recommended to use immediately that, as I looked up the side effects and a little bit of the history on this particular diabetes medication, I opted not to consume it ever, out of fear of harming my body, much more than what I was already going through. And, so grateful to, have made that decision, as tough as it may have been, so grateful that I made that decision. And then, speaking with Mr. Tony Lee to get a workout regimen in place, which was very challenging during the height of the pandemic. Wasn't comfortable with going to gyms. In fact, I think a majority of gyms were closed, or had a lot of limitations set on them. And so Mr. Lee, he recommended that we train virtually on video chat, which was unheard of for me and did not sound appealing. But I was in a state of desperation, and so I gave it a try. Definitely one of the best decisions I ever made when it came to my personal health, because I learned how to use just my body weight to get a very effective workout, to burn, get a good burn, and burn some calories. And so this was all conversations that took place immediately after finding out I was diagnosed. I went home and I cried and talked with my wife, talked with my parents, and immediately started researching, what can I do to better my situation. I didn't want to be stuck in the moment of the I guess you call it trauma, of having heard that, and spiraling out of control into this pity party where I would have just ended up consuming a lot of the foods that had got me to this point. So started doing a lot of research, started researching herbalists, different herbs that Breon made mention of, because they were all recommendations by him, not instruction, which I always appreciate. In our consultations, it's recommendations, and have to make your own decision. So I started looking up different herbs, different sea vegetables, and realized that there were some of them that I wanted to give a try to incorporate into my daily regimen. I started researching various foods, what wasn't good for me and why, but then researching what was good for me and why. There was a couple of documentaries that I watched on a few of our popular streaming apps, What the Health, as well as Forks Over Knives. And there's information that I pulled from both of those documentaries that were very paramount in putting together my eating regimen, and how I was going to, tackle each day as it relates to getting the necessary nourishment that I need to be able to sustain and carry myself through the day, but also heal my body. And I
Right.
document that in great detail in my book, Uncomfortable Peace. About 3 months, well, it was 3 months and a day after my diagnosis, I went to see my primary care physician, who didn't diagnose me. In fact, there's information I detail in my book on the neglect that I experienced from my primary care physician, to where it caused me never to see him again after the visit
Right.
3 months after my diagnosis. But he was upset that I opted not to take the medication that the clinic prescribed me. But once my numbers were shown from that 3 month
Right.
that visit, he was blown away, somewhat in disbelief that I was able to get my A1C level down tremendously. I was diagnosed with an A1C level of over 15.5, 15.5 being the highest that they could
Wow.
measure it. So it was off the charts, literally. I was able to get that down to 7.4. So I was very
Wow.
happy about that, but I
Right.
still had work to do. And then, I had lost about 25 pounds, in that 3 month time frame. And, I just wanted to continue to get better, get healthier. And, I was very fortunate, after that particular visit in October, to learn more about water. I realized that the water that I was consuming was actually counterproductive for the
Wow.
goals that I had set for myself. And I switched immediately to drinking a certain type of water that was very inexpensive. Get from my local market. I'm actually dedicated an entire chapter to water and the science behind water, and how some water isn't helpful for the body and how some water is, which I would implore everyone to read twice,
Yeah.
that chapter on water, and may change your outlook on the water that you consume today. And it was quite a journey, but there were a lot of down moments through this journey. For all the success that I was fortunate to experience, even
Right.
with the accountability partners that I had in my life, from my parents, my in-laws, my wife, at the time, my unborn child, that really kept me motivated.
Right.
Mr. Lee and Breon, who were in my corner, and spoke to them frequently through the week. There were times of shame and emotional struggle, where I cried. I was upset. I was sad. Dare I say, felt depressed at
Right.
different times. And in those moments, I went to what I knew could make me feel better, which was food. Ironically enough, it only made me feel worse.
Right.
And I had to learn that it's okay to consume these tasty things, but I couldn't let it control me. And I have to remind myself that frequently, each week, that I can't let the desires for nachos, fried chicken, pizza, tacos and pasta. I can't
Right.
let the desire for that control me and dictate how I live my life. Because up until the point of my diagnosis, I was living to eat, and it was a bad mentality to have. Especially considering the health issues that developed from such a mentality. And I'm just fortunate and so grateful to God that he just displayed so much mercy, extended
Right.
so much grace, and allowed me the time to really get it together for myself, to use the information that's available to me for free,
Right.
to be able to use the fruits and the vegetables and natural herbs and sea vegetables to heal my body, to have a more controlled manner as it relates to food consumption, and what I ate and how often. Also, I implemented intermitting fasting. That helped out a ton with growing in my discipline, and making sure that I didn't go to bed with a lot of food on my stomach, and
Right.
packing on calories overnight. I mean, it was really tough, but the journey was very rewarding, especially to be where I am today. I'm in the best health of my life, the best shape of my life since birth. And and there's still work to do. I mean, in addition to wanting to share my story with others and motivate them to get better and to at least educate themselves on
Right,
this chronic illness, so that they can tackle it fully equipped and not just taking the advice or recommendations from someone else, regardless of who that person is.
right,
Huge advocate of self-education. I also want to continue to fight for the longevity of my own health. And knowing that at a moment's notice, any given day, I can slip and fall back into the mentality that I used to
right,
have, and just unravel and undo all the progress that I've had. Of all the things that I've given up, that I've decreased consuming in my life, there's two things that I haven't had since being diagnosed. That's soda and juice. I've only drank water since I've been knowledgeable of
right.
my health status back in July of last year. Now I do make homemade fruit and vegetable smoothies, and then I also juice vegetables with
Hmm.
a juicer. And so juice and vegetables is disgusting. Let me tell you, it tastes horrible, but the benefits of it are amazing. Which I do talk about in my book as well. It's very beneficial. I looked down on juicers for years, and what a shame.
Mhm.
I feel felt very ignorant once I discovered the benefits of juicing for myself. I felt very ignorant. I was very ashamed of how prideful I was to look down on
Mm,
something that others did that they chose to do for themselves. It had nothing to do with me.
right,
And but I am grateful again that God extended so much grace and mercy to allow for me to still be living and breathing, to be able
right.
to learn of those benefits for myself and implement them. I'm on vacation now, and so I don't have my juicer with me, but there is one where I am that I get to use. But back home, um, I juice every morning,
That's
and I
awesome.
consume a certain amount in the morning. I consume a certain amount later in the day as well, and it's just become a part of my daily regimen. I mean, I've been fortunate to get my A1C level down back into the fives,
That's
coming
amazing.
from over 15.5. I mean, my blood glucose level when I was diagnosed was a 476.
Wow.
And in the last checkup that I had, I was down to 79.
That's
So
amazing.
almost 400 point drop. And, relatively a short amount of time, roughly 15 months. And, my goal is to, be an advocate for all that are, struggling with type 2 diabetes, and let them know that it's possible. You just got to put in the work, and you got to
Right.
want to.
That's amazing, Vernon. When I hear your story, I think a lot words that come to mind were discipline, overcoming, and repentance, because I think that in order to be able to change your lifestyle, one requires discipline. You have to overcome learned habits, right? You have to
Mhm.
overcome, like you said, you had a food addiction. And it's funny because you were saying, like, the same thing that you were trying to utilize to help you was the same thing that was making you feel worse. And that's literally what addictions do. It's like it's something you run to as a comfort, it's something you run to try to make yourself feel better. But then in the end, it doesn't actually, especially once your mind has been opened and you gain that knowledge, it doesn't feel the same. It doesn't do the same things that it did. And it doesn't give you the same relief that it did now that you have a new view on it. Something
Mhm.
that I did want to ask you is like during this time, what did you feel like you discovered about yourself? Like as you were learning to these new eating habits, as you were struggling to, accept them and do the new things, what are some things that you learned about yourself?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I was able to kind of emphasize about myself that I try hard not to accept for many years is that I'm a weak human,
Hmm.
very weak human, in more ways than one, and that it's a lot of stuff that I just can't do on my own. I mean, to date, the one main thing that I can think of that I can quote unquote do on my own is breathe, because it's involuntary. But everything
Right.
else, I can't do it on my own. I mean, I couldn't wake up out of the bed and put my socks on without God. I couldn't
Amen.
pick up food with my hands and bring it to my mouth to nourish my body without God. And so during this journey, which is still ongoing,
Right.
It was a huge emphasis once I sat down and thought about it and realized that, I wouldn't be where I am without God as far as the progress, but I wouldn't still be alive without God. And so, again, it was just more of an emphasis of how much I need God every day. And granted, my contributions to my relationship that I have with God is horrible. I have so much more that I could do, that I could give. And even in knowing that, because God knows it,
Right.
he still is merciful, he's still gracious, he's still loving, and he's helped me through probably one of the most scariest times of
Yeah.
my life. And so that was one of the main things that I learned about myself. Second, is that nothing is impossible.
Mm.
Um, Impossible is a state of mind, such as possible.
Yeah.
And you got to make up your mind about something. You got to put time and energy into drawing a conclusion. Why not draw the conclusion of something that you can actively work towards, regardless of how hard it is,
Right.
especially with knowing you're not alone in that quest. And so, in addition to my wife, who's my backbone, in addition to my parents at the time, my unborn child, who's now 7 months, love him to death.
Mm.
In addition to my accountability partners, Mr. Lee and Breon, my in-laws, and all my family and friends, I was on a quest, and God was right there by my side the whole time.
That's awesome. I love that. And so what is one piece of advice that you would give someone who's in the situation that you were in, where maybe they're scared to not take the medication or they're scared to make those life changes? Is there anything that you would suggest or give them to encourage them to go after it?
Yes, self-education. I like to think of and I have no idea where the quote comes from, but we perish for lack of knowledge.
Hmm.
And I may be paraphrasing that, but I remember hearing it
Yep.
somewhere.
I've heard
And
that.
when for anyone that is struggling with type 2 diabetes, or was recently diagnosed, or has been on diabetes medication, for any period of time, that doesn't like, how it makes you feel for whatever reason,
Right.
educate yourself on first the disease, the chronic. Keep in mind that the majority of people that experience the diagnosis of type 2 diabetes, it's due to something that you did yourself. It's
Mm.
self-inflicted for most people. Can't say for
Right.
everybody, but for most people. And so figuring out as you learn about that chronic illness and what led to it developing in your body, then you're able to then do further research on what can I do to reverse this. And once
Right.
you have that knowledge, you have a decision to make. I'm going to utilize this information and help myself to get better, or I'm just going to put it on the shelf or throw it away and not use it
Right.
at all and continue on with the way that I've been carrying myself. So
That's awesome.
self-education is the biggest piece of advice that I can share with anyone. Educate yourself.
Yeah, I love that. I think that self-education is definitely very important. And even if it's like a modified version, but just having the ability to make that decision for yourself, I feel like is very important, and it's empowering to help you to be able to figure out what you want to do instead of just following whatever somebody told you to do because, well, that's what they said. They said A plus B equals C, so that's what I'm going to do. But you never really stop to think about what that means. So I definitely think
Yeah.
that that's important. Um, so one of the last questions that I had for you is why was it important for you to do things the way that you did? Like, why was it important for you to not take the medication? I know you talked a little bit about looking at the side effects, but I was just curious if there was anything else there.
Yeah, one of the things that stuck with me, even in my emotions when I was diagnosed, and I've actually heard this consistently from other recently diagnosed type 2 diabetics. Doctor told me you can still eat whatever you want. Just make sure you take this particular medication. And
Hmm.
so once I realized that type 2 diabetes for myself was self-inflicted, it was a result of a horrible food addiction, why would I, even in my emotions, why would I continue to put in my body what has got me to this negative state
Right.
and only depend on taking a certain medication to better myself? Um, the doctor also made mention of managing managing the chronic illness. They never mentioned reversing. It wasn't until
Right.
I did my own research that I saw that reversal was possible.
Mm.
And when I put two and two together and really thought about it, within a matter of 24 hours, I was like, nah, I'm not gonna use the medication. I'm gonna take the natural route, and I'm gonna however long it takes.
Right.
I'm gonna heal my body naturally, so that once I get to a comfortable point, I'm not stuck between choosing, do I continue to use this to stay where I am, as in the medication, or do I let it go and try to take it from here? Which, I've never been addicted to medication, but I would
Right.
assume in cutting something off like that, you relapse and you go back to, wherever your starting point was that you were trying to get far away from it. I just didn't want to put
Right.
myself in that position. And I'm grateful that I went the route that I did. I mean, compared to some others that had been diagnosed for a while prior
Right.
to my diagnosis, and I say this with a lot of love and sincerity. I'm in a much better state of health than they
Mm.
are, for having made the decisions that I made, to take responsibility of my health, to stand up for myself in the face of medical professionals saying,
Right.
hey, I'm actually not going to do this. I read, I saw, I listened to
Right.
online that this isn't, the only way. And for me, it just didn't seem that it didn't seem beneficial in comparison to the other options that I saw. And so, and I just stuck to that. And thankfully, by the grace of God, the results have spoken for themselves for every medical professional that I've encountered, that's taken a look at my numbers, where I started from, and where I am currently.
That's awesome. I love that, Vernon. I love your story. It encourages me. I love your ability to self advocate and just all the research that you did and just all of the self knowledge that you gained through your process. I think that it's important. I think that that's why I love doing this podcast, because I want to encourage people to do that same self discovery, that same digging deeper into figuring out why they do the things they do, what is causing it, and just getting to a healthier place, whether that be spiritually, emotionally, physically, whatever. So where can people find you? I know you have a book coming out. I know you got things going on. So how can people find you?
Yes, so I'm constantly available on Facebook and Instagram, facebook.com, instagram.com/ Vernon P. Davis Jr., Jr. That's spelled V as in Victor, ERNON, P as in Paul, D as in David, AVISJR. I have a website, www.dfpublishing.org.
Awesome.
And if you guys go to amazon.com and search Uncomfortable Peace, I have a purple book cover that you'll notice either on the first or second result. That's my book that details my entire journey.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Vernon. It was great having you, and I can't wait to take a look at your book.
Thank you so much for having me, Noah. It's definitely been a pleasure.
Of course. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. Romans 12:1 and 2.